Great. So we have in the chat a question from Joe for Alice, I think, which was, do you believe you left the corporate world at the right time? And would you have done anything differently before you took that leap of faith?
It's always the right time. You're always supposed to leave at that time. For me, it just felt like I just couldn't do it anymore. Like if I went into another corporate job, like I would just be like dying inside. And so it was definitely the right time for myself. And what I would have done differently, what I know now is like I would have spoken to a lot more people who made that transition, who had left their corporate jobs. I continued to speak to people who were still in corporate for like support, whether it was like friends or older colleagues. And I didn't reach out to the right people, which is why I included, kind of like one of my tips is just to really expand your network and start looking for people who have become entrepreneurs or who have made really big career pivots. And then the most important thing was just be more kind to myself. I was very frustrated for many years, and I felt a lot of guilt and shame in leaving a successful corporate career behind, like, because it can look right on paper, but it can feel very wrong. And that misalignment, has much more serious repercussions the longer you kind of like wait. And so, know for anyone out there who's like, oh, I had the perfect job, I should feel so grateful, but it's not the perfect job for you. So it's okay to like leave it. But I did feel a lot of anxiety and a lot of just like, oh, like who am I to say no to, such great job opportunities with like the experience I've had, the education that I've had. But I just wasn't being kind to myself. And so those like negative thought loops are like in my head. So really finding ways for you to be more forgiving to yourself and just know that what you want is okay. What you want is okay. Good question.
Okay, so we also have a question from Heidi, which I suppose for both of you or Ryan. Which HR think a person is not clear about his or her goals, lack of leadership skills, if he or she pivots into a different field after 5+ years of work experience?
That's a good question. I mean, for me, I think that internally we would be frustrated that we invested, X number of years into you, and then you've decided to pivot. But I think that's probably, and again, I think that Alice would agree with me here. That's probably a fear that's pretty unfounded. You should do, if you're good at something, the organization will value that, right? So if you were good at marketing and IT, the organization will place you in either. It won't be that upsetting. I don't think they'll look at that necessarily as a person is unclear. It's just someone who's very talented and can do the job and can contribute to the organization and make the organization successful. So I think that's a pretty unfounded. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Hopefully that answers the question.
And I would also add that it's also quite ridiculous to think that someone will do the same job for their entire life. There are many facets to a person. There are many facets of you. There are different things that you like. And as you grow and change, you will notice that how you spend your time 9 to 5 will change as well. And there needs to be a lot of change that happens throughout, all organizations in terms of just recognizing that you'd rather have someone in the right place than the wrong place. Because when someone's not in their right role, there's a lot of resentment, there's bitterness, there's frustration, there's stress. I mean, that's why people are burned out and stressed and kind of afraid to leave their jobs or pivot their careers, because there, isn't that space, or there isn't that opportunity to do so. But I think it's definitely like changing as well. But to me, I'm always just like, well, why would you want to keep someone in a role that wasn't fulfilling to them? But when they are excited about learning something new and applying their transferable skills to something else, like, there is a lot to be said about someone who is feeling very passionate and really wants to put in the hours to do something new than someone who's done the job like forever and has like years and years of experience.
Great. So we have a comment from Annabelle Sharon, which I guess you guys could comment on. I believe the inherent talents get you only so far, maybe to full performance level, but to move beyond, you have to make yourself noticeable, aka raising your hand. So I guess for Ryan, what do you think raising your hand and making yourself noticeable might look like?
What it might look like. So in the situation with Lisa, who was essentially just an analyst level in the accounting department, she literally grabbed every project available that no one wanted to do, and what that did was that put her in front of people that wouldn't have otherwise seen her, right, or heard from her. And so in that situation, she stepped up to the point where it was just she was a part of every conversation. And so specifically with her, she was part of the due diligence in a merger and acquisition. And nobody wants to do that stuff. That's it's a lot of administrative work, but she did it, and by doing that, she got in front of the C-suite. And she found an executive advocate that paid attention to her and started to care about her trajectory, her career trajectory, especially internally. And so that's what it looked like for her. And, it can look like other ways as well. But I think that's what I would say is don't wait for, opportunities to come to you. Look for them, find them, be, active and aggressive in finding them and looking for them. And then ask to be on that project, ask to lead it. You'd be surprised. I actually think, and we're NAAAP and the other organizations that are part of this, we're here to build leaders and everything. You'd be surprised, and not surprised, I guess, but in the workplace, there's not a lot of people who want to lead. If you just raise your hand and say, yeah, I'll lead that, I think you'll beat out 90% of people out there. They don't want to do it. They don't want to lead. This is very difficult work. Nobody wants this responsibility, this burden of, if you were to make a mistake, it's going to be on you. Even though if you were to succeed, it's on you as well. Somehow people don't want that. So I say, just step forward. As I mentioned, just step forward, take it, raise your hand, be aggressive with it. That's probably the best way.
So, and one question from Vin, at least in the corporate side, I've heard the best way to pivot to a different area is to get an MBA. Would you agree? For example, hypothetically, I'm in finance right now and I want to go into marketing, but getting an MBA is expensive. So what are y'all's thoughts on that?
I mean, that's just one way. That's like the easy way. That's what everyone's always like, oh, I'm getting an MBA so I can pivot. But I also think that's it's very privileged too, because you have your undergraduate degree, which let's say it's almost $500,000 right now. That's what tuition is costing. Yeah, undergraduate degree. And to get your MBA on top of that, like there's just so much money. There's definitely other ways to switch like industries. And I think that Ryan had a really good recommendation about going to a smaller organization. A smaller organization that maybe needs help in finance and in marketing. Maybe you can straddle like two roles, or go in for finance, and once they like really like you, they want to keep you, you can go and transition into marketing. There's also masters specifically like for marketing, not just an MBA or something like certification, like shorter programs. But an MBA is always it's always a good option if you're looking to tap into the network. And in some ways, I feel like it's just as hard to pivot using an MBA as well as going that other route of kind of like going into a smaller organization, meeting the right people and networking, just because there are so many qualified people out there. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, to Vince's question, I generally agree with that, but and Vin, only because I know you work for a really large organization, I will say this: everybody knows McDonald's, but do you guys know about McDonald's University? I'm sorry, Hamburger University inside McDonald's. Yeah, so McDonald's has a training program called Hamburger University. It is probably the most elite internal corporate MBA program, more so than even Harvard MBAs. The people who McDonald's trains in their Hamburger University come out and run a Hall of Fame Fortune 100 organization, right? They don't even go to Harvard. They go to Hamburger University and they run that empire at McDonald's. So I guess what I'm saying is, Vin, you might want to look at internal programs that develop leaders like you. That can save you a lot of money on an MBA, but also, it could really that kind of stuff is, when you go to an MBA program in Harvard, everything is theoretical until you get, onto the street. But at Hamburger University, they're testing and doing everything, for real, and you're learning with real world, data. So people don't necessarily know that it's based in Oakton, Illinois, Hamburger University. And I think that there's probably a version of it in a lot of the large organizations. You just have to find it. So I would encourage you to look and see what leadership programs you have, especially if you work for a big company. They probably have it, and see, what programs they have to help you, go forward in your career internally.
Oh, I wanted to add one last point. Any quote unquote extracurriculars you have, things you volunteer for, are excellent ways for you to develop skills that you think that are a bit lacking, like in marketing, or, something else. So kind of like doing something on the side to get extra experience as well, especially if you're able to like manage certain budgets.
All right, great. Well, I think this does it for the question and answer section. So I will throw it back to you, Heidi.
Great, thank you so much. I think it's 8:03, so we have to wrap up now. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today, and hope you have learned some tips, from like job searching strategy and kind of the mindset we're pivoting, into a new career. Again, thank you Ace NextGen, FYP, NAAAP, and NOVAL for your support. Thanks Ryan and Alice to be our incredible speakers today. Feel free to reach out to any of the organizations if you're interested, and shout out to Vin for running the streaming platform behind the scenes, and Harry for hosting the Q&A time. And stay tuned. We are going to have 2 other professional development events in September and October. One will be focusing on dealing with the workplace microaggressions, and the other is going to be around how to start your own business. So if you follow any of the 4 organizations, you should receive the registration information later this summer. So see you next time. Bye, guys.